Hello, I'm Scott Wipperman, the pastor here at First Presbyterian Church. And no matter who you are or where you are in your journey of faith, know that you're welcome here. We hope you enjoy today's service on this video, and we invite you to come join us for worship anytime that you would like, or join us in any of the other activities of the church. For more information about First Presbyterian Church, please visit our website at fpchelena.com or call us at 442-4775. God bless. And I'd like to ask the children, I'll go around and talk to them, what do they think heaven is like? We'll start with Madison here. So what do you think heaven is like?
I think it's like it is here. But it's like it is here, but it doesn't have sin and bad people in it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And what do you think heaven is like?
I think it's a bright, sunny, and happy place.
Okay. Good, good. Well, this isn't a question just for the children. This is a question for everybody. What do we think heaven is like? You know, we see those pictures of angels sitting in clouds, right? You know, and what do they have with them always in those pictures? Harps, right. So how good are you guys at the harp? What other images do we have of heaven? Streets paved with gold, yes. The walls are jewel encrusted. The foundations are 7 layers of fine, precious stones. Maybe our vision of heaven is sitting on a beach next to crystal blue water, lounging under an umbrella with one of those drinks in our hand that has a little umbrella on the top of it too, you know. I don't know. What other kinds of images of heaven do people have? Yes. Lots of happy music. Okay, good. And what did we hear this morning that heaven is like? Jesus rattles off a few things. Heaven is like a mustard seed, like some yeast, like a hidden treasure, like a fine pearl. Those are exactly what we think heaven is like, right? I mean, that just makes it perfectly plain, doesn't it? And after Jesus gets done telling this, he then looks at the disciples and says, "You understand this, right?" And of course they all say, yeah, we got it, no problem. So do you all got it? No, I don't know that the disciples fully understood, and when I read this, I'm not sure I fully understand these metaphors of what heaven is like. But there's one author who suggests that maybe we ought to take these metaphors and bring them into more contemporary examples, and maybe that can help. I mean, like the mustard seed. It's the tiniest of seeds. If you stick it in the ground, you probably can't find it again, you know, kind of thing. It's buried. And it's just there out of sight until all of a sudden it erupts and it grows into a giant plant, becomes a housing development for birds. And that's kind of a positive image, unless you really don't want a mustard plant growing, you know, kind of thing. That's kind of a positive image of something erupting into our world. But maybe a more modern day view of this would be getting an email that has a computer virus in it. And it lays there hidden until it infects your hard disk and your computer goes south and your life is turned upside down because of this thing. Or how about yeast? In the parable, this woman is mixing yeast into dough, and it's just not making one loaf of bread. She's mixing it into 60 pounds of flour. She's mixing this yeast into a giant amount of dough, going to make lots of bread. And maybe a more modern day example might be something like an antibiotic that gets into our system and once again is invisible, but goes about doing work and knocking out bad things and bringing about health and life and new possibilities. You know, these two examples both are about us dealing with things that we can't see, but that are taking place, that are happening. We can't see the yeast, but it is making the dough rise. We can't see the antibiotic, but it is knocking out the bad viruses and things in our blood. We don't see the seed in the ground, but it grows and a big plant emerges. And I think this might remind us that the kingdom of heaven is here amongst us, even if we're not seeing it, even if we don't notice it. It is here. And it will erupt. It will break into our world, and we will see it sometime. Even though we're not seeing it now, we can take confidence that it is present here amongst us and that it is coming even further and further into reality. And what about a hidden treasure? You know, maybe you've gone to your grandparents' or your parents' house and you're messing around in the attic and you come across this old dusty painting and it kind of strikes you, so you clean it up and you take it home and you hang it on the wall, and then you Google the artist and you find out this painting is worth a mint. Or maybe, like with the fine pearl, that you are out seeking for something. You're looking for that. And you find it. And so, yes, you do go off and sell much of what you have. The parable says all, to buy this thing that you're seeking out. Maybe it is the house you always dreamed of. Maybe it is some possession that you would like to have. Something that you think is of great value. A carving, a statue, something else, an old book. So you sell much of what you have in order to get this valuable thing. And both of these parables, I think, are speaking about not so much about the thing that is found, the painting or the thing that you are seeking that you go out and buy, but the consequence of finding that. You now have something of value that you do anything for. That when we find the kingdom of heaven, it has become so great for us that we'll do anything to be there, to stay there, to be in God's presence there in the kingdom of heaven. And so I think these parables are telling us not so much about the right answer for what kingdom of heaven looks like, but more about the consequences, more about the fact that the kingdom of heaven is here present amongst us, even if we're not noticing it, and that it's going to break in upon us, even if we're not looking for it. It will come upon us. And this kingdom of heaven coming upon us might be a worldwide thing, where all of a sudden the whole world sees the kingdom of heaven present. And it might be a very individual thing, where all of a sudden the kingdom of heaven has been opened and revealed and made clear and plain to you. But either way, you can take heart in knowing that we are standing in the kingdom of heaven right now. God's presence is here amongst us. I think this is what Jesus was trying to tell us with this parable, with these parables. And then we get on to the Romans reading. So Paul is speaking, and he's saying, in the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit himself intercedes for us through wordless groans. And he who searches our hearts knows the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for God's people in accordance with the will of God. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. For those who God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of the Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. And those he predestined, he also called. And those he called, he also justified. And those he justified, he also glorified. And what then shall we say in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He who did not spare his own Son, but gave him up for us, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? Who will bring any charge against those whom God has chosen? It is God who justifies. Who then is the one who condemns? No one. Christ Jesus, who died, and more than that, who was raised to life, is at the right hand of God and is also interceding for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall trouble, or hardship, our persecution, our famine, our nakedness, our danger, or sword? No, in all of these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Jesus Christ, our Lord. Paul packs a lot of stuff into this little passage, doesn't he? I like the first part. It starts out kind of bad. We're weak and we don't know how to pray. But that's not a problem. Because even though we don't know what to pray for, the Spirit intercedes for us with things that can only be expressed through groans and offers up our prayers. Quite often people feel like they don't want to pray in public because they're not sure if they're a good prayer. I don't know if that's an actual noun or not, but just groan, okay? Because the Spirit is speaking through you, through those groans, and is relaying the prayers that you need to be praying to God. Don't be afraid of praying. Don't be afraid to pray if you don't know what to pray for. The Spirit is interceding on your part. And then he gets around to talking about who can be against us if God is for us? Who can judge us if God is our judge? And the answer to that question is, well, lots of people. You see it on TV, you see it in our things, people judging one another, people being against one another. It's certainly rampant in our politics at this point in time. But the fact is that God is the only judge. And God is for us. So if anyone is trying to be against us, if anyone is trying to judge us, it's inconsequential. It makes no difference. And feel free to stay here, Brittany. This is God speaking to us through your child, Nova. So this is not disturbing at all. Please feel free to stay here, okay? Okay. So we do not need to be concerned about who might be against us because God is for us. And it's inconsequential that someone would be against us, that someone would judge us. That means nothing at all because God is our judge. God sees us and holds us in love and grace. And then Paul goes on to talk a little bit more. And he speaks about what could separate us from the love of God. Now, some of us might think that this is an invitation to a challenge. What can we possibly do that could separate us from the love of God? Let's see. What could we try? Let me urge you not to take up this challenge, okay? You're going to fail if you try to do this, to find what could separate you from the love of God. You'll probably be miserable in the process of trying to execute this challenge, and you're going to fail ultimately, and you'll probably even be more despondent then because you just failed at trying to prove that you could separate yourself from the love of God. But you just can't do it. Look at the title of the sermon on the front of the bulletin. No matter how hard you try, you just can't do it. So don't even bother trying, okay? Because Paul tells us that nothing can separate us from the love of God. Now we might think whether we were trying to do it intentionally or whether we weren't intentionally doing it, but we did something that was so vile, so wrong, that we can't be in the presence and the love of God. That's just not true. No matter what we did out of greed, out of self-centeredness, out of inconsideration for others, out of blatant want of something, it didn't put a stamp on us. It didn't do anything permanent to us. It didn't separate us from the love of God. Next Sunday will be a communion Sunday. And sometimes people feel that they can't come and take communion on any given Sunday or maybe for a whole host of Sundays because they've done something that would make them unworthy of coming to the table. But the invitation that Jesus sends out, that envelope has your name on it. No matter what you've done, you are invited. I mean, look who Jesus physically invited to dinner with him that night before his death. He invited someone that was going to betray him and lead to his death. He invited people that were going to say they didn't know him. You are invited regardless. Nothing can separate us from the love of Christ. So don't worry about that. Don't worry about what you might have done. Don't worry about what things you might do in the future. You are wrapped in God's love. As Karl Barth said, God is holding us in his arms. All we have to do is turn around and recognize that fact. So don't try to see if you can step outside the love of God, because you just can't. Rest knowing that nothing can separate you from the love of God.